Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the session today. My name is Swapnil Khetan, and I'm moderating the session today. Co-moderating with me is my colleague Rohan Sood from our Gurgaon office. And our webinar today covers a function which was quoted almost 10 times in the Prime Minister's address to the nation on the 12th of May 2020. That is supply chain. Now, the quick context on this webinar, over the last few months, we've had a lot of requests coming in from our partners. So michaelpage has been hosting a series of focused webinars across industry functions. The purpose essentially being knowledge sharing and sharing of best case practices. This is usually conducted with a select group of audience from certain focus industries. And the idea took shape because a lot of our partners reached out to us requesting insights be shared which are specific to their industry or to associated industries, right? So in continuation of our efforts, our audience today is a sublime mix of heads of supply chains and functional leaders from industries like FMCG, FMCD, chemicals, packaging, logistics, and e-commerce, each of whom have very strong interlinkages and dependencies with one another. Our speaker panel for today comprises of two gentlemen, both of them stalwarts, Ajit Joshi and Sameer Bhatnagar, both of them industry stalwarts in the domain of corporate industries and consulting world. And under the wider webinar theme of supply chain, they will be speaking on topics that have been arrived upon after an extensive recce that was conducted with the supply chain leaders who are in attendance today. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker for the session to you guys. I'd like to introduce Ajit Joshi. Ajit is an extremely accomplished senior executive with over 30 years of experience, which is global, and that's across the e-commerce as well as the retail industry. Currently a Bain Company external advisor, he's also on the board of V-School and NMIMS, and he spent his last 15 years leading the retail charge in the Indian industry. Prior to that, he's been in Australia for 8 years. If I look at some of his key achievements for everyone's knowledge, he's one of the people who's responsible for building the brick and mortar chain of furniture stores at Urbanladder, delivering a revenue growth of almost 64% between the year 2017-18. He also built India's largest electronic store brand, Croma, with 9 years in the sales function, delivering total revenues of 615 million, making it the first profitable e-commerce venture, while with them as the managing director and the CEO. He was also responsible for the $2 billion Asia's second largest convention center and luxury mall, which is the Geo World Center by Reliance Industries. And one of his other accolades is that he was also the designated project manager for the Sydney Olympics back in 2000, in Australia. An MBA from the University of Melbourne. He's also a PDP from the Cornell University. He's a diploma in hotel management from the La Roche, Switzerland Institute. And he's also been featured with numerous awards in the India market. So some of the core awards that he's won include your Retail Icons of India. That was in August 2019, the ET Personality of the Year. And he set an industry benchmark by winning the Retail Personality of the Year and the Retailer of the Year awards 7 consecutive times with Croma. So Ajit, it's a delight to have you on the panel with us. Ajit today will be speaking on running successful businesses, how integral supply chain is going forward, and over to you.
The introduction, Swapnil, overwhelmed with your kind words. Friends, COVID-19 has been a tragic event, but that's not the end of the world. It's okay, right? If I start, Swapnil, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, cool. I'll start again. It has been a tragic event. COVID is not the end of the world. I think we all got a bright future ahead of us. Having said that, the world has changed. If we look at our businesses, when we go back to the offices on 18th of May, when lockdown gets over, and hopefully this time it does get over, we will never see the way we work in our offices, whichever organization you belong to. And Swapnil did share the list of industry leaders you are and the wide variety of industries you come from. you will see something or the other has changed. But I will concentrate on the three things in terms of supply chain which will happen and which are happening as we speak. Number one, disruption has become new normal. COVID is not an isolated event. If you look at it, the world or the nature or the God, whichever thing you believe in, has been preparing us for a longer period of time. 2011 to 2013, we faced Arab Spring crisis. In 2011, there was a horrendous tsunami and earthquake in Japan. Subsequently, 2012, we had earthquakes in Indonesia. 2013, we had tsunami in Solomon Islands. Dhaka garment factories collapsed, and that affected the world retail industry for apparels and garments. 2014, sanctions were imposed on Russia post-Ukrainian crisis. 2015, there was a typhoon, tsunami, and the west coast of US suffered because of the slowdown. 2016 was a defining year when the Brexit started, and it's still almost over, but hopefully it will get over soon. The Europe got disturbed and the rest of the world felt the tremors. 2016 also saw Ebola outbreak across. US faced horrible hurricanes one after another. They had Harvey and subsequently Emma affected the coastal lines of US, and the cities got closed, which was unheard of. 2018 onwards, US-China war started as soon as President Trump came into the power, and new US policies were defined, which started affecting the rest of the world. 2018-19 onwards, cyber attacks on various organizations, including companies, became common. And 2019 onwards, we saw bushfires in Australia, which world was shocked to see. Never ever in the Australian history they had seen the bushfires like this. It just got over. That got over. Australia faced the COVID-19 crisis, but they and New Zealand have successfully come out of it. And now what? Australia and Canada are the two greatest grain suppliers to the rest of the world. Australia is facing drought. So somewhere down the line, if you look at it, God was preparing us to face these crises. Institute of Supply Management, they did a survey with a lot of companies, and nearly 38 they have responded saying that 38% increase was there in the disturbance of supply chain from 2018 onwards, and it is steadily increasing. It's not going down. 2019 March survey shows that 75% of the companies got affected because the world factory, China, got affected. Now, 75% of the respondents have said that their companies, their supply chain, and their end customers have been affected. Then how the hell we are going to face this? So before I move on to the details of my discussion with you, can we have the first poll question to the audience, please?
Sure, Ajit. So I will help to run the polls, and we have Ajit's first poll question for everyone now. So you should see that pop up on your screen. Question is your current organization prepared to face the new world the day lockdown ends? So the options are prepared, not prepared, or partially prepared. So please submit your answers now, and we'll be able to share that with everyone on the call later in terms of results. We've also had a couple of questions come in, so thank you so much. And there is also an option for you to submit your questions anonymously if you're more comfortable with that. So feel free to take a look at the questions already posted. Like I said, give it a thumbs up if you like it. And then otherwise you can post a question of your own. All right, so I think most of you have already done the poll. We still have a few more if you didn't manage to get one. And here are the results. So majority of you, 67% of you are partially prepared, 21% prepared, and 12% not prepared. Is this what you expected, Ajit?
Great. I was expecting that. Partially prepared was the answer I was expecting. And great, friends. Let's move on, Sophia. Thank you. Thanks for the help in the polls. Now, friends, this is something which I was expecting, because none of us, if you ask Michael Page, if you ask me in a consulting world, or Samir who's there, none of us have got an answer for your industry specific solutions. So we all have to work together. But before we move on to that, let's look at the assumptions on which we were running our supply chains. In past, we consolidated our volume to the lowest, lowering the unit cost. We looked at reducing the inventory. Inventory was a bad term. I'll give you a practical example. 2008, we were facing the recession across the globe. My first thing as a managing director of Croma was, we were a new company. We approached a company, a consulting firm, and we applied theory of constraint, which was advocated by Dr. Eddie Goldrat, which told us that you consolidate your stocks in a particular warehouse and then start up. We followed the hub and spoke model, and then you start supplying to multiple stores. We minimize our inventory dramatically. What we did was, we created a pipeline with our suppliers, great suppliers like Samsung, LG, Sony, and so on, and they started holding some part of our stocks. Now, things are going to be very different when one reopens these physical stores or the online stores. The other thing what we had done in 2008, why I'm saying this crisis also gives you the opportunities. That was the year when we realized that the customer was becoming very price sensitive about buying certain commodities. We used that opportunity to launch Croma private label. And I just want to share one example. When you decide to use the opportunity, and the leaders who guide you makes a difference. When I was taking this presentation to my chairman, there was one statement made, and that defined the entire private label strategy. He just asked me, Ajit, what are we here for? And I said, sir, we are here to make a presentation on Croma private label. He said, quality is not for discussion. So in an opportunity, when you're trying to grab that opportunity with your two hands, but you have a leader who's also telling you that you deliver a product to the consumer, but don't compromise on the quality. Make sure that quality is equal to that of, or better than that provided by the branded manufacturers. I move on to the next thing. What we also learned in past was the suppliers should be kept at arm's length. We never got friendly with the suppliers in the sense to understand what problems they face, what kind of sub-suppliers they have, what kind of raw material they are procuring for us. And we always kept them at the arm's length, which is not going to help us in near future. Supply chain improvement was difficult and was a costly affair. Exactly same principles on which we were running the business. But I also want to share in 2008, what we also did was, when we launched subsequently the washing machines, we not only procured the washing machines from China, but in 2008, we started the dialogue with the Turkish manufacturers who were formerly manufacturing one of the leading German brands in their factory. And we asked them to develop a washing machine for us, which got delivered subsequently. In 2014, we also developed a relationship with the manufacturers in Thailand. And they were the manufacturing goods for the Japanese brands, but their excess capacity was used by Croma to bring in the quality products to their customers. So, moving on to the 15 industries, which I have made a list and I want to read out to you, because these industries are going to see a change for next 6 months, or they're going to get change forever. And these industries, number one, I start with the recruitment industry, which our host is famous for. The job industry is going to change because they have to look at the new skill set, new kind of people or newly trained people to recruit and work with their clients in an advisory role to recruit the specific job functions. Secondly, retail has changed forever. Travel, tourism, hospitality, automotive, cinema houses. Can you imagine social distance missing in cinema houses. The number of seats will be, they pay at times the rental based on the number of seats they have in each cinema houses. So everything is going to change. Logistics has changed. Local transport is going to change. Restaurants, restaurants business is very unique. You go to celebrate, you have families and friends. Even if you go on a date, you are with your partner, you want to enjoy that proximity and great food. Now, all that is going to change. There's a restaurant which has been planned and opened in Holland now, which has got glass cubicle, which only accommodates 2 of you or 4 of you in cubicles. So per square feet realization or per seat realization in the restaurant business is going to change. Luxury products. China has reported that when they opened the luxury outlets after COVID lockdown got over, they saw some tremendous sale. Fendi has reported some crazy numbers, but that was lasting for only for a week. But the luxury products industry has changed forever. Live sports. Classic example, in India we are suffering because we don't have IPL during this time. IPL has gone out of window. Oil and gas. Again, there is a little green shoot I see. As of yesterday, ABC Australia has reported that they are allowing few contact sports like Aussie rules to start with the New Zealand Warriors and so on. So there is a hope that some of these sporting activities might come back. The oil and gas industry, construction industry, film industry, events and conferences, techs and gadgets, automobile manufacturing, and finally, but very importantly, because I have seen the list of participants, and a lot of them come from the startups. Fintech industry is going to change. Your valuations are going to change. World is going to look at your companies very differently. So, can we then, look at doing our second poll question, please, before I get into some of the details?
Ajit, so everyone, here is the second poll question. The question is, have you done the assessment of your organization in terms of new world skills, technology, or strategy required? Yes or no answer. Our Q&A section going up a little bit, which is great. We love that. We have, an additional 15 minutes that we are ready to extend just to help answer as many questions as possible. So feel free to pop the question in. Just let the poll run for about 5 seconds more. Please vote if you haven't. All right, I'll close it now. Here are the results. So 64% of you said no, you have not done the assessment. And the repeater says yes.
Well, this is a little bit concerning for me because, you guys are the industry leaders and Thanks, Sophie. I'm requesting Sophie also to give me a bit of a reminder, but I will request you to look at your industries, your role in a very different way. My advice to you would be, please remain calm, cool, collected. Keep focused on the things which you know best. Be empathetic to and supportive to your employees. Open to learning. And here I want to spend a minute. When I want to say is that please be open to learning from your colleagues, your colleges or universities, because there are new techniques being invented and requested to be learned. Colleagues, competition. Competition also can be a great teacher. Learn from technologists, learn from HR specialists, and learn from consultants, because nobody has got a straightforward answer to solve your problems. I practiced one thing in life was R&D in my company. I trusted my colleagues, believed in their research and the development of the products they did. But I also followed one principle, which was RNC, which is research and copy. There is nothing wrong in copying from your competition or somebody from your industry which is far off. I'll give you a quick example. We copied something which was practiced at Best Buy. At Croma was how to sell the DSLR cameras, and we were rocking. At the end, I would like to say everything is not horrible and grey in color. I see a lot of shoots. Swiggy in India has reoriented itself. They have started delivering even groceries. Today's article in Economic Times says Zomato is equally looking at delivering new products because they have a great network around. Louis Vuitton has started manufacturing sanitizers, which was at the request of French government. Why I'm saying that you need to be innovative, you need to be flexible, and you need to look at what kind of energy as a leader you are transmitting to your people. I think, Sophie, I'll stop at that. And if we can have the last quick poll with our people, and I will take, if there is anything remaining, I'll take it in the Q&A session.
Sure, Ajit. Here's the final poll for Ajit's section. So it says, it is very obvious that most businesses will be forced to make hard and difficult calls. In which area will your organization make future investments? So we've got human resources, technology, or are you choosing to invest it in some other areas? I'll let it run for about 10 more seconds in the interest of time. And then I'll pass the time over to Rohan, who will then introduce Samir. All right, so I'll close the poll right now. Thank you to those who have voted. And here are the results. So majority of you said that you will be investing in technology, 64% of you, and then followed by 20% in human resources. That's pretty interesting, and we can come back to this in the Q&A section. All right, I'll pass time over to Rohan now. Rohan?
Okay, thank you, Sophia. Thanks, Ajit. Definitely quite insightful and a few cues that all of us can pick up on. I'd like to take this opportunity now to introduce Samir Bhatnagar, who has kindly accepted our invite to be our speaker for this particular webinar. Samir, thank you so much. Just a quick introduction on Samir. Now, Samir is currently a partner with KPMG for the transport and logistics vertical, and also the global head of ports for the business. He has about 18 years of experience overall, with the experience of working on projects not only in India, but also across Australia, Southeast Asia, Middle East, as well as Europe. He has consulted both government as well as private sector companies on topics which range from growth strategy, performance improvement, supply chain feasibility studies, as well as M&A transactions. Prior to KPMG, he was working with Tata Strategic Management Group and has worked with a couple of other Tata Group companies like Tata Motors as well as Tata Steel, and in the logistics space with Adani Ports and Logistics as well as Gati, right? By qualification, he's a mechanical engineer and also holds a postgraduate diploma in management from the IIM Lucknow. Right, Samir, thank you so much again, and over to you.
Thank you, Rohan, and welcome to the webinar, and thank you, MichaelPage, for inviting us and allowing me to interact with a lot of stalwarts here as well. I think one of my questions has already been answered earlier, but Sophia, if you could have the first two questions, and then we could probably launch into my discussion, please.
Sure, Samir, no problem. Here's the first poll that Samir has for overview of the call. At what level is your disaster management, emergency response, or BCP for your supply chain management at? So at what level? Is that detailed to the last unit operations, detailed to head of sub units only, broad framework for response, or the final option is we do not have one? So please vote now. So I will run the two polls in succession, and then maybe Samir, you can comment after the two polls ends. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So 5 more seconds for those of you that have not managed to vote for this one. Pretty interesting in terms of the responses. I'll end the polling now. Here are the results. So the answer seems to be a pretty even split between detailed to last unit operations, which is at 36%, and broad framework for response, which is at 42%. So only 3% of you said you do not currently have a plan. All right, so I'm just going to jump on to the next poll question first. This is the next poll question. The question is, have you developed and shared it, meaning your crisis response plan, with your supply chain vendors or partners? So your 3 options: yes, with all vendors and partners, Second option is only with select tier 1 vendors and partners. And the last option is no, it's currently retained only within your company. All right, couple more seconds for those of you that have not voted yet. Okay, I'll end it now. And here are the results. So majority of you, 42%, said that it's only retained within your company. That's pretty interesting. So maybe comment on that. And then 33% have shared it with tier 1 vendors or partners, 25% with all vendors and partners. What do you think, Samir?
Thanks for that. And I think I would not say whether it's expected or not expected, because I think we've got a very wide variety of participants today. And while we focused on the largest, I'm also typically always intrigued by what comes in second. And I find in both the polls, there were two very close second finishes. So in the first poll, as you would have seen, people said that yes, we do have a plan that's around 36%. And in the second one, people said it is shared with our tier 1 vendors and it's not within a company itself. So if I put these two categories together, I probably find that between 50 to 70% of the respondents do have a business continuity plan in place or a crisis management plan. It's definitely there within a company, and if we would have some more questions, we would have said people who are within the company and what's the level of detailing they're having. Sectors of the two could be correlated. But the good part is that most of you as leaders and as stalwarts have actually recognized this and have something in place to allow operations to run. And I think it just goes back to the point which Ajit mentioned at the beginning, that disruptions and crises are here to stay. We use a term known as VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, crisis scenario, and that is here to stay. You will always have disruptions. You will always continue to have some crisis, and that is something that we all have got used to, and it's part of our business as usual scenario. And probably that's really why, yes, they did create a certain amount of disruption in COVID, but companies were fast to bounce back, and they are resilient. But the issue is, how resilient are they? I just want to mention that yes, I am a partner with KPMG, but this webinar is in my personal capacity, and the views that I say are personal views and do not represent the views of the firm and is not attributed to KPMG. So here onwards, I just wanted to kind of mention that the good part is we do have systems and mechanisms in place to allow the supply chain to respond. The question is, and so the question says, how do we prepare for future? What changes will we see? I mean, that's some of the key questions. There are a lot of initiatives which can be taken. Technology, the last question said, is definitely a key enabler for supply chain changes. But what I would like to focus on is that as things become more difficult and more uncertain, the level of planning really needs to go down into the supply chain to the next level tiers, and the detailing of these plans have to become more specific. I think that's really the headline message. A lot of hard work has gone in by the supply chain managers, the chief operating officers. I see one interesting question about somebody asking, will I become that important that I could potentially become the CEO of the company? Unlike marketing and sales guys, well, that's something we could probably take as part of the Q&A. But the point is, supply chain is extremely important. People have done the hard work. It's about gradually moving on to the next level. And that's how organizations evolve. In my 18 years of working with clients, no change comes transformatively at one go. People keep moving from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4. And probably in the next 5 to 10 years' time, if the same poll were done, we'd probably find that people are at, if you say a scale of 1 to 5 in terms of resilience and preparedness, you'd probably find that we are at level 4. If today we are at roughly 2 or 2.5 out of 5. So, and that's how organizations evolve. And that's how corporates make investments. And that's how the entire ecosystem realizes that, yes, I now need to make the next set of investments in processes, people, and technology to really prepare my supply chain for the next level of disruption. Which really brings me to one aspect, and I just want to highlight that Zurich Insurance did one research last year, and they found two trends which are reflected here, is that the disaster response, etc., or disruptions were not experienced at the tier 1 vendors, but at tier 2 and tier 3. So whatever we had, the spot poll actually represents what has happened globally. That almost the disruptions were more seen at tier 2 and tier 3 levels, not at the tier 1 vendors. And secondly, they mostly said that between 50 to 60% of the investments would be in technology in order to make the supply chain more resilient. What is the very basis for this, and what is it that we should be looking at going forward when we look at changing the supply chain? And I'll talk about the tiering. I'll talk about technology very briefly. There's a lot of technology, and the third is in terms of really how you kind of manage this transition. And I believe I have another 6 or 7 minutes to do this. Step 1 is really sharing the entire supply chain plan with tier 2 and tier 3 vendors. The first and most important thing to realize is we talk about supply chain and we talk about logistics. The supply chain is the process of management. Logistics is the physical movement of goods. Most of the disruptions which you see are actually the physical disruption. Be it an earthquake, be it a tsunami, be it a bushfire, be it COVID, be it a geopolitical risk, be it a political change like a Brexit, etc., or a war, or sanctions. And this happened also in the Middle East, when Qatar and Saudi had a geopolitical issue and certain trade lanes were closed and shipping lines had to change their routes. That's the disruption of the physical supply chain. The physical logistics, and that is really where your supply chain at a process and management level starts getting affected, right? And that's really when you talk about that when you move from tier 1 vendors, you need to go down to the next level and start engaging with the logistics service providers, the people who are physically carrying your goods and inventory, and see what are their continuity plans. Work with them and share your management plans with the people really learning and driving logistics. I saw questions around last mile problems, and over the last 2 months, we've been approached by a lot of clients who said, how do we manage our logistics? And Railways is running, India Post is running, emergency services are allowed, but he's still finding challenges in operations. And that's primarily because the last mile, the ground level operations are getting affected physically. So your business continuity plans need to go beyond just the management and the supply chain process to the logistics, physical activities as well. And we find in our discussions that this connection is typically lost. Many of the logistics service providers, be it a warehouse or a trucking company, are not integrated as partners in your ecosystem because they see this tier 2 or tier 3 vendors. A lot of the relationships with trucking companies and transportation or logistics companies is seen as a very contractual relationship. Quite often it's based on L1, lowest price, procurement, etc. And hence you may not be getting quality vendors, or your vendors may not be investing in enough redundancy or resiliency in their operations. And that's really where we talk about partnering, going beyond tier 1 to tier 2 and tier 3 vendors as well. Second point I come to is technology. Yes, technology in terms of giving you real-time information. So when you have disruption, you know exactly where people are, where your assets are, where your goods are, where things are moving. That's important to know. It's also important to share information that when you reschedule and plan your supply chain, people know exactly what has to do what. So technology is definitely free, etc., to take care of prices and things like that. But again, one thing that we need to caution about is because of a malware virus. It's not unusual to expect that it could also be an electronic virus next time. So we had a malware affair 3 years back, which hit APM terminals and Maersk shipping. A lot of shipping lines got affected on this. Is my voice clear now? Is it? Yeah, okay. I think probably there's a blip in the network. So it could be an electronic virus next time. And so when we talk about having everything interconnected, let's not forget that a virus which could come in could probably spread through all your electronic systems, no matter what firewalls, and you've got hacking and various other people continuously inventing technology hacks. And if your system is too dependent on technology, if your machines are extremely automated, everything could shut down. Okay, and we've seen cases in the past where power lines are down, technology is unable to reach, your telecom towers are down. You do not have telecom connectivity, and that's really when human ingenuity, human communication really comes back to the fore. So automation is important, technology is important, We'll put all the security around it to ensure that there's enough redundancy, but technology can also get hacked. So yes, it is an important solution, but we need to be careful and see sometimes offline methods, picking up your regular standard fixed line and talking to people and working with them physically sometimes could help in restoring the supply chain. So technology is important, but let's not be over dependent on it. And the third point is about the people as well. And how to kind of implement these business continuity plans. So a lot of times plans are made, but people are not aware about it. And one of the reasons for it, it's not being tested enough. Okay, and an important part is testing these business continuity plans through simulations, and not just simulations in a computer lab or in terms of a virtual war room, but in actually physically testing it. It's a concept that I personally call as the fire drill concept. We run fire drills in our offices and buildings. An important point is, can we do it in our supply chains? It's small units. What if this plant shuts down for 2 days? You actually shut down a plant for 2 days and see, does my supply chain respond? What if there's a strike in this region for, let's say, 24 hours? How am I going to get supplies? And you actually shut down the supply chain for 2 days. This requires you to work with your partners in simulating these fire drills, so people are aware, or people know exactly what happens, and in case there's a communication breakdown or any other breakdown, you know what could go wrong with your business continuity plan. So I think that's where my third idea about looking at fire drills and testing your business continuity plans comes in place. And last but not the least, like I said, yes, there is processes and there's technology, but I think what COVID has shown is that it's people who matter. You pick up the phone and ask somebody to do something. I think they've done that a lot. People really go out of their way. They understand the emergency. It's a big world. Lots of people getting affected, but at the end of the day, everybody across the world was equally affected. So the degree of empathy people had across the world was universal, and hence people responded as people, irrespective of which organization or where they were. They understood the crisis. They understood what needs to be done, voluntarily or involuntarily. So I think investing in people, building empathy with people, not just at looking at all your partners in the ecosystem, not as organizations, not as contractual organizations, but probably spending 5% in empathy. Ajit talked about people, about empathy, and it's probably, I understand we all run economic organizations, for profit's important, but in times of crisis, it's empathy which really helps us cross the line. So I think that's something we should all keep in mind, and not deal with all organizations as contractual organizations, but go beyond that and look at trust with them. So with that, I come to the end, and I think, Sophia, if you can have the last question, I'll just have my closing remarks, and we can go into the poll.
Sure. So here's the last question from Samir. The question is, when did you last test your crisis response or business continuity plan? Is it in the last 6 months, last 12 months, or more than a year ago? So you can vote now. We already have a lot of questions in the Q&A box. What you can do is either post your question, or you can give questions that you like a thumbs up. So our most upvote, currently 5 thumbs up. So have a look through that. So the most popular questions will get bumped to the top. So we are likely to get to that in this session. All right, I'll end the poll now. And Samir, here are the results. So 47%, so almost half of you said more than a year ago, 33% said in the last 6 months, and 19% in the last 12 months.
Thanks for that, Sophia. And like I said, again, I'm very happy that my general sense that always look into the number 2 as well. The number 2 here is also pretty close second at 33%. It's a bit behind 47, but it's still there. It's not less than 20%. So good to know that 1/3 of our respondents have tested it in the last 6 months. Really, so it's for each of you to look at the 3 questions and see where is it that you responded along the 3 axes, and said that yes, am I testing it recently? Have I worked with my vendor partners in it? And do I have it only within my company, or it's really down to the framework? So I think if I just summarize, develop it right down to the last level of operations if you can. There's a cost involved in it. That's for you to take a business call. Second is involve your vendor partners into it, and have a plan, develop it to the vendor partners, and test it. I think these are just 3 basics I would say are takeaways if you look at the supply chain. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Samir, thank you so much for that. Some great insights over there. We'll move on to the next session of the webinar, which is the Q&A session. Happy to see that we already have a significant number of questions which have already been posted. If you have any more, please post them online. Or alternatively, if you already have a few questions which are posted, you can like them and they'll come up to the top. So I'll start picking up the more popular questions, basis the voting which has come in. Now there is one question on retail and e-commerce, which I think I would like to address to Ajit at this point in time. So Ajit, this one's for you. How is COVID-19 going to positively impact e-commerce as a space? And potentially how much market share is the offline business going to lose because of COVID-19? So I'll just quickly repeat. How will COVID-19 positively impact e-commerce, and how much will offline businesses lose in terms of market share because of this?
Well, I'll start with the positive side of it, which is the e-commerce. I certainly see a great amount of movement even with the brick and mortar retailers moving towards e-commerce or getting associated with the e-com partners. So I see at the what I would say the end of the year, growth would be in the range of 30 to 60% for the e-commerce companies. Certain categories of physical retail will not take off, which is totally dependent on discretionary income. Example, jewelry business, furniture business. These things will take certain amount of time, so it will take 7 to 8 months. Post Diwali, I see some kind of a movement in those kind of businesses, apparel to a certain extent. Because if you look at even today's article in Economic Times, people have changed their habits for the food. People have changed what they eat. These basic things have changed. What they wear also. Like yesterday's our quick discussion was about we should be fine wearing a t-shirt. Okay. Now, if you're going to work from home, obviously you're not going to call for formal wear. So things are going to change. People are prioritizing. When I talk about e-commerce, e-education included, a lot of kids are today going for the e-education and it's not cheap. So second number of expenses Indian parents incur after buying the house is kids' education, and there are no budgets. So a lot of family funds are going to get allocated for the e-learning part of kids. So I see e-commerce doing phenomenal business, but brick and mortar, and as it is, they got enough problems in their hand to deal with mall owners, landlords, all sorts of things are happening. They will be looking at resizing the stores. So I see definitely a moment towards e-commerce for most of the categories.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ajit, for your insights on that particular question. I'll move on to another fairly popular question, which I'd like Samir to address. I'll read it out verbatim, Samir, for your reference. What kind of structural changes do we anticipate in supply chains in light of the coronavirus pandemic?
Like I said, there are two levels of supply chain. One is the process supply chain, and there's the physical logistics. Principally, some of the principles of supply chain management will not change, which is really about having logistics, about having goods income and inventory. What's going to change is not about how you manage it, but in terms of the redundancy that you tend to build into these supply chains. What's really going to likely to change, like I said, is to separate the supply chain management from the physical disruption, the physical logistics. What is likely to happen is the change of how you organize your networks. So there was this entire drive towards economies of scale. So manufacturing was coming into very, very large factories at one single location, driving economies of scale in terms of hub and spokes, having one large warehouse for distribution, etc. What people would see is that we need to create and go back to a model where we do create local distribution centers and have multiple supply chain partners. So the point about concentrating a lot of operations and business into few to derive economies of scale is likely to change structurally to have a wider variety of service providers and a wider spread of your physical logistics, so that if disruption is there in one part of the geography for whatever reason, another part of the geography could supply. and hence you have alternate service providers as well. So that's the big structural change, if I say conceptually, how people are going to look at the change in the supply chains. Really, this could push up costs. The question is, how would consumers look at cost? And on the other hand, what you could see is companies, in order to reduce cost, look at technology and certain other measures to optimize a lot of this and use a lot more data and analytics to optimize, to really say that despite my expansion and loss of economies, do I make up in terms of operating efficiencies elsewhere? So I think these are the two important changes that we see in the patterns in which the supply chain and your logistics are like to change. I think Ajit had a point he wanted to probably add on to this.
I completely agree with you on that. The first part, what we talked about of the supply chain, Toyota has very successfully implemented that. There are a lot of in past, and this happened especially after the Thai floods which happened. What they have done is multiple manufacturers of the same parts have been organized across the Asia. They ended up incurring almost $1 billion loss of sales because of the dependency on one particular manufacturer manufacturing a particular part. So they have distributed that. They are doing pretty well. Just one part, and the other part is when you are rationalizing manpower, you are looking at new technologies. Cost should not be passed on to the end consumer, because consumer world over there is a recession, and how much he or she will be in a position to absorb that will be a question. So whatever operational efficiencies you derive, you should be in a position to absorb that cost, or some part of it at least.
Perfect. Right. Perfect. Thank you, Sameer. Thank you, Ajit, for your insights in this one. I'd like to lead on to another fairly popular question. This has been asked by Mohit Upadhyay. Mohit, thank you so much for your question. Ajit, I'll let you pick this one up. I'll just read it out for your reference. This has got to do with China. So now China, which is, of course, one of the biggest suppliers across different industries, is losing confidence with the rest of the world. I think he's referring to the talk of other countries imposing sanctions potentially on China. How do you see the post-COVID cost-effective as well as competitive supply chain? So the impact of this going forward with obviously the rest of the world losing confidence in China?
Well, classic example is the speech by our own Prime Minister yesterday, where he's talking about self-reliance. And that is not going to happen overnight, because, example, there were certain, say, parts which were manufactured for a German car maker in India, in China. That's not going to change overnight. It is going to be a gradual process, number one. Number two, we need to be mindful that there are very good economies within the Asian belt, which is like Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand. They will also offer some manufacturing hubs. I'll give you another example. Australia produces world's largest quantity of iron ore. Today, there is an Indian gentleman, Mr. Gupta, who is talking about green steel plant to be started or restarted in Australia itself. So countries are looking at reorienting themselves for various things. And he's talking about supplying back to China, the produced steel. Whereas in Australia, there is zero manufacturing which is happening. Most of the items come from China, or 80-90% of the imports happen from China. Right. But things will work out in a different way now. The other countries which are untapped, I feel, is Southern American countries like Brazil, Ecuador, and those kind of countries, and also the African belt. Perfect.
Great, Ajit. Thank you so much. Moving on to another question, which I'd like to direct to Sameer. Now, do we see a spike in collaborative sourcing and SCM solutions, warehousing and logistics across organizations as well as industries to potentially optimize cost as well as capacity? Is that a possibility?
Yes. So, in fact, that's one of the initiatives which could be taken. And there is one such example. I'll come to another industry which did it in the past. And that's really when Ajit talked about that companies will look at spreading out their risk, their concentration risk, which we call in terms of academic or more conceptual terms. You spread out your portfolio, okay, and concentration risk. which will entail that you lose your economies of scale and your unit costs will go up. And as Ajit mentioned, recession is there for this year, maybe next, we don't know. But really, you cannot pass on the entire cost of the supply chain. So you will need to reduce cost. And there is technology, automation, and there's a question of automation as well, which is there. But one of these things is about sharing your infrastructure and the supply chains where possible. I know some of these supply chains are competitive advantage for some companies, and they pride that my supply chain is so good it can get anything anywhere. So there are industries where the supply chain really is critical. For example, e-commerce, for example. We may not see collaboration, but where it is, collaboration can really reduce the cost of the supply chain, especially in terms of building and sharing redundancies. And there could be different models, whether on business as usual level share it, or in the case of crisis or in current disruptions is where you have a protocol with other industry players, through an industry body to share supply chain and resources. So there are two ways that it could work. And it depends on industry to industry, it depends on regional also, because this requires a lot amount of trust, and that's a cultural issue, it's a business environment issue. The other point about collaboration, like I said, is this happened in the telecom infrastructure industry, especially in Europe when they were rolling out 4G some years back. The cost of infrastructure was very high, and players decided that if we are to get cost-efficient telecom services, we need to collaborate, and that's where the tower sharing agreement started happening between players. And from which also was born the entire business of tower companies who said, we'll be a common service provider, based on levels of service. I build common infrastructure provider. And in fact, the growth of the 3PL industry in India is probably one of the best parts for 3PL out of this, is that they could really be the neutral party, which says that everybody cannot build their own supply chains and build redundancy. Let me have a common infrastructure and a common supply chain where I have an overall contingency built in, and that contingency gets shared across players. So that's one way where things could happen. But yes, collaboration between competitors, that's what we call as cross-sectional collaboration, or vertical or horizontal collaboration, which is down the supply chain with your suppliers, etc. So where you can do it with competitors or other players in the industry, you probably do horizontal or 3PL or your own. Otherwise, if there are concerns, privacy concerns, competitive concerns, that's where I come back to my point. The more you collaborate down the chain and don't build redundancy across the entire chain, because at the end, it's like the bullwhip effect in the supply chain, which we read about a lot, that and it really adds up a lot. But if you integrate across, you could have a smaller redundancy, which is available for all these supply chain members.
Samir, if I can just add something.
Yes, please, Ajit.
What Samir said, with the Indian example, what I have come across is Wow Momos, which is a chain out of Calcutta across the country, have collaborated today with ITC, Imami Group, and Procter & Gamble, along with Swiggy, to deliver FMCG products to their customers' homes. So very different kind of alliances are getting formed. Just yes. An example to strengthen what Samir was saying.
Perfect. I think leading on to another interesting question which has come up, which Ajit, I'd like you to pick up. Fairly generic, but I think you can definitely give your views on this. Considering the current unpredictability, how do we predict demand? What are the mechanisms, or what's your take on this?
Well, all of us have been sitting on a data, huge customer data, for so many years. Okay, when you look at analyzing your sales patterns, if you go back, and even if you have not done it today, if you map the events of yesteryears, when you had elections, when you had disturbances, okay. So the disturbances could be in the form of elections, riots, in the form of floods, and certain cities were affected. When you look at the graph and plot this information on top of it, you will certainly get some pattern in terms of demand. And predictive analytics will be in a position to help you to get some accuracy in terms of your future demand predictions. Invariably, what happens is when we look at up and down graphs and we do not plot the events which supported these things, and we forget about the yester events. 93 onwards, if you look at it, we had riots in Bombay. The whole Bombay was shut down. So if I was analyzing apparel sales for a department store chain, I will look at it by plotting these events when we had the election, 14 May we had elections. Then 17th June, July, August, we had elections. So those kind of things, if they are plotted, you know the pattern in which your sales have moved, and then you can definitely do or floods or those kind of calamities.
Interesting. Perfect. Just a quick note to all the participants. We've hit 1 p.m., which was officially the end time for the webinar. But we'd like to extend this to about 15 past 1, purely because of the number of questions coming in. I would definitely want to take another 10 minutes to go through as many questions as possible. So thank you for the questions, and please bear with us for another 15 minutes or so. Leading on to the next question, I think, Samir, I'll address this to you. This has got to do with warehousing and automation. Now, what do we see as the changes in physical supply chain processes within warehousing, specifically post-COVID? And will this be a trigger to companies to further automate or a trigger for further automation?
Thanks for that, Rohan. In fact, I was just thinking of actually launching a poll about it. And we might, if Sophia is possible, we might actually launch a poll because there are divergent views on this. And it comes because it's extremely product and geography specific. Generally, not really as a rule of thumb, but given labor costs in many economies, it's far cheaper to have and adjust people that invest in technology. Technology can be really expensive, especially when technology cannot work in silos. You can't just automate a part of the entire process and the rest of it is manual and you don't get the efficiencies from technology. So you end up not just adding technology and automation, but if that automation doesn't fit into your warehouse management system up, or in terms of the actual logistics operations or the pick and pack operations, it does not. You don't get the full benefits. So the whole cycle of automation could be expensive depending on the scale and size of the warehouses. A lot of the distribution, last mile warehouses, etc., have smaller scale and hence becomes expensive for automation, and extremely manual operations give you both the flexibility as well as the cost. So we can keep talking about disruption, and we talk about flexibility, demand, X minus. And as Ajit was explaining, he was talking about seasonal and macro trends. But even at a micro level, a certain festival in a certain city or a state can spike up demand for 2 or 3 days. It could happen in a certain locality, etc. So the minute you go down to the distribution, the scale reduces, and automation is a fixed cost. Once you put in sensors, an IoT, and the entire network, it is expensive. And if you don't have the kind of demand, it's probably not viable. But yes, some of the mother warehouses where you've got relatively steadier demand, lot more SKUs to deal with, automation could make a big impact there to ensure the supply chains keep running and it's more efficient. So that's why I'm saying it depends at which point in the supply chain you're looking at automation, what kind of warehouses. Mother warehouses could see more automation. But again, it's very product specific. High SKU based warehouses, FMCG, garments, Apple could be there. Industrial products, for example, potentially could find a challenge in terms of a labor automation cost. Having said that, I think Sophia is ready with the poll, and if some of our participants could just run this one spot poll, I think it would just kind of also reflect what does the industry think in terms of their actual operations. Over to you, Sophia.
Right, thanks, Samir. So we have one spontaneous poll question. All right, so let's take that. Do you see an increase in warehousing automation? Yes, and within the next 6 to 12 months. Yes, but within the next 1 to 3 years, or our products are not yet amenable. So let's do this quickly because we're running short of time. So I'll just leave it running for another 5 to 8 seconds and then I'll close. Please vote if you have it. All right, I will close the poll now. Here are the results. So nearly half of you said that yes, but within the next 1 to 3 years. Very closely, second is 42% yes, within the next 6 to 12 months. And then the remainder, 11% said your products are not amenable.
Thanks for that, Sophia. Brilliantly done. And I think that probably answers the question as well, that yes, we will see automation. But just to be guarded, it depends on which part of the supply chain. But yes, I think you've also got the answer there. Thank you so much, Sophia, and Rohan, for that.
Perfect. Guys, one last question before we move on to closing statements. And I'd like Ajit to pick this up. I think This is from Jasdeep Singh Sahani. Jasdeep, thank you so much for your question. This is a play on Mr. Modi's speech a couple of days ago, Ajit. So after the PM's address about vocal about local, what impact do you think this would create for both MNC as well as Indian companies, particularly on manufacturing and supply chain in the space?
Well, again, Prime Minister was giving direction, and it is not something, what happened in 77 when overnight Coca-Cola was asked to pack up their factory and leave India. That's not going to happen now. He is saying that you probably could do a strategic alliance. There could be an Indian partner instead of just allowing the multinational to be present, and the technology could be passed on. So I don't think Prime Minister was just giving one particular. I've seen the WhatsApp sticker which was floating around saying that Subway has changed its name and those kind of things. A lot of people have said change. That's not going to happen. And let's be also honest that a lot of technologies, a lot of things get invented in the Western world, and Asian countries, India included, we are dependent in terms of doing the cost-effective manufacturing of it. So collaborative way will be the right way for India also, and somewhere when government is giving that kind of a direction, they also have to make certain changes in the policies in order to facilitate the manufacturing in India. So it's a long process, but Prime Minister has given a direction to that.
Perfect. Ajit, thank you so much for that. Guys, with that, we come to the end of the Q&A session. If there are any other pressing questions that you definitely want answered, you can of course email Swapnil or myself, and we'll try and run it past Sameer and Ajit and try and get you as many answers as possible. Swapnil and Sophia, over to you for closing statements in the poll.
Sure, Ron. Thank you. And we actually have a lot of decision makers from the supply chain industry with us in the session today. One of the insights that we want to pick up from them would be through the page polls that we run. Sophia, could you please assist us with the 3 questions?
Sure, no problem. So this is the first question that we have for you guys on the call. In context of this upcoming year, which is or are the most important supply chain skill sets for your team or businesses? You can choose more than one answer for this one, so choose as many as it applies to your team or your business, and then hit submit. The graphs are moving very rapidly, so thank you all so much for voting. All right, I'll just keep it running for the next 5 to 8 seconds, and then we can close. We have 2 more questions after. All right, thank you for voting. I'll end it now. A little bit hard for me to read all of this, okay, but clearly the 2 strongest ones which are tied are logistics and distribution and supply chain analytics, but following very closely behind end-to-end planning, followed by procurement and sourcing, and then finally customer service and operation. Should I run the second question now?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So the second question that we have for you is, at what level of seniority would you consider meeting or hiring candidates the above chosen skill sets? Is that at the executive and senior management level, middle management, or frontline/operational level? Please vote as well. We have had a lot of questions today, so thank you all so much for being so participative. We appreciate that a lot. Apologies that we're not able to answer everything in the interest of time. All right, most of you have voted now, so I will end the poll. And here are the results. So it's mainly middle management level at 45%, followed by executive at 30%, and then finally frontline and operational staff at 25%.
Yep, we could move to the third one as well.
No problem. Here is the last question we have for you. Thanks for sticking with us through our 10 polls today. So the final question is, what is the estimated time frame to onboard this skill set? Is it less than 3 months, between 3 to 6 months, between 6 to 9 months, or greater than 9 months? Right, final few seconds for the remainder of you who haven't voted. All right, gonna end it now. And the results say the strongest response at 43% between 3 to 6 months, followed by 6 to 9 months at 27%, less than 3 months at 22%, and finally greater than 9 months at 8%. Over to you, Swapnil.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sophia. And I think that was really insightful. Thank you, everyone, for your responses. We want to link it to what we do at Michael Page. And at Michael Page, our endeavor has always been to push the envelope when it comes to sharing credible insights and see how it can help each other within the same industry or the industry functions that we choose to interact with. Some things that allow our partners to take the best decisions in the interest of their businesses. We've done this through hiring initiatives in the past. We've done this through mapping critical talent for our partners, under market mappings, assisting businesses without placements in these times, and sometimes through sessions like the one that we just concluded. Undoubtedly, today would not have been possible without Ajit and Samir. Both of you have been incredibly engaging and patient with us through this process. You've been involved in the entire process of crafting the webinar with us. And I want to thank the two of you for joining us today. It has been an absolute delight to have the two of you on board with us. To Sophia Wong, because she's the driving force behind all of our webinars across the region. Thank you for all of your efforts and hard work that you put in for us. A big vote of thanks to the members of the supply chain hiring practice that we have across Mumbai and Gurgaon, who've been your primary point of contacts to invite you for this webinar today. And we will all be at an arm's length with you, just trying to answer any questions that you have that are unanswered in the sessions today. Please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us in case you have any of those unanswered questions. A recorded version of this webinar will be available, so please feel free to contact us if you have any follow-up queries. And most importantly, thank you, everyone. We appreciate your being here in this webinar with us today. Thank you once again for joining in, and we will see you the next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Swapnil. Thank you so much to everybody and for organizing this, and great to kind of hear from all the participants. Thank you so much.
Samir, sorry I stepped in between in your session, but thanks. Enjoyed your company and didn't know you were from PSMG. That's great.
Somewhere everything links up to the Tata Group. We'll catch up again.
Yes. All right. Okay.
We'll end the session now. Bye, everyone.
Sophia, thanks for your patience. Thank you.